Hi guys, Erin from Top Shelf DIY. Thanks for tuning in. One of the hardest things to master when you first start working with wood is how to ensure an accurate cut every time. You don't want to have to make a million cuts and have to keep going back and trimming down a little bit more and trimming down a little bit more. And you also don't want to cut something short and waste any expensive materials. So today we're going to talk about 3 different ways to ensure you get a good cut. How to measure down to the 1/32nd of an inch, my shortcut for working with fractions, and also how to account for the width of your blades so that you get a good cut when you're actually doing your cut. So the first way to ensure you are getting an accurate cut is to know how to use your measuring tape and getting it as precise as you can and as exact with your fraction as possible, and knowing what exactly you're looking at when you're looking at a tiny little increment on your measuring tape. So that said, I'm just going to turn this around and just quickly review the increments. So we have our holes, so that's 3 and 4, and there's our half, and there's quarter, 1/4, 2/4, or half, 3/4, and then between your quarters you have your eighths, 1/8, 2/8 or 1/4, 3/8, 4/8, which is a half, 5/8, 6/8, 7/8, 8/8 or 1, and then between that you have 16ths, and this measuring tape actually gets as precise as 1/32nd, which honestly I do use sometimes. It helps, especially if you have to mark increments. You need to have the exact middle point on a frame, for instance, or the exact middle point on a piece of wood if you're building something. So that's where it runs, and the more exact you get, the better. And one thing I will add, the more practice you get, the more you can just look at your measuring tape and be like, oh, that's 3 3/8. Oh, that's 4 1/4. You know, it just gets faster with time. So practice it, use it on random things that aren't perfectly even. Typically things you build yourself are not perfectly even. Random pieces of wood in your garage are not perfectly even, so just give it some practice. So step 2 for getting an accurate cut, yes, wait for it, it's called math. I know, it's unavoidable in building. I avoid it like the plague. I'm an English major, but you gotta do it. And fractions in particular, not my favorite thing, but with building they're kind of essential, especially if you're going to try to get a really precise cut, and if you want to have them or third them, you know, you need to know exactly how to work with the fractions quickly and easily. So just a quick tutorial to jog your memory on all of the things you learned about fractions in 3rd grade. All right, so let's say we have a piece of wood and it is 10 and 11/16 inches. Okay, so what we need to do is to convert this into one solid numerator over denominator instead of broken up this way. So we multiply the denominator by the 10, which is 160, plus 11, which gives us 171, and you put that over 16th. It basically equals 10 and 11/16. I feel like an online tutor right now. So then if we want half of that, so we want the half mark on the board, multiply that by 1/2, gives you 171 over 32. And now we have to break this down a little bit. So 32 goes into 171, 5 and some change. So we know our big number in front is going to be a 5. And it actually goes in 5 times 32 equals 160. So that gives us a remainder of 11/32. So there's your half mark. And you can do this with any fraction, or if you need a 1/4 of your cut, or a 1/3 of your cut, or any of the following increments, That'll get you where you need to be. The last and most important thing to take into consideration when you're making sure your cuts are accurate is taking into account the width of your blade. Now, this may seem common sense, but it took me a very long time to learn this, and sitting there in frustration as my cuts kept being off, either too short or too long. So let's show you a couple of different ways to make sure that you're cutting at the right spot. Your blade is usually about 1/8 of an inch, but that's not always the case. So you have to kind of go tool by tool, whether it's a table saw or a miter saw or a handsaw. So let's look at this miter saw, for instance. Now I'm actually not going to be cutting anything because it's on the floor. I'm just kind of doing this for demonstration purposes, but you can see there's a laser line here that is meant to kind of show you where it's going to cut. That's not actually where it cuts the wood, okay? Let's be very clear on that. It's going to cut the wood where the blade meets the wood. So if you look, oh yeah, look at that. It's not where the line is. It's actually behind it. Let's look at it from this angle. It's not the same spot. So really, you gotta look more where your blade is hitting the wood and less where your laser line is showing up. And the same goes for a handsaw. I mean, there is no laser line to look at, but if you're cutting right on your line with your handsaw, and again, I'm not gonna turn this on because I have something obstructing, but if you cut right on your line, you're actually going to be cutting it wrong. So that's it, the 3 ways that I try to get an accurate cut every time. Hopefully that will save you some headaches down the road, maybe some possible trips to the lumber store for a cut that was wrong on a very expensive piece of trim. Just really know how to use your measuring tape, working with fractions, and know the little bit of width that you need to account for when you're cutting with your tool itself. Any questions, feel free to put them in the comment box below. Also, if you like this video, hit like and subscribe. I'll be posting more tutorials and updates for newbie builders, especially those from the Handy Woman front. And I'll be posting written content to go along with this on the blog Top Shelf DIY as well. Thanks, and have a good one. Bye.